Today we're delighted to welcome Julian Rachlin, who will be leading the Phoenix Symphony in concerts from November 8th through 10th. Julian, we are thrilled that you will be leading these performances in a wonderful program that includes Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, Tchaikovsky's Variations on a Rococo Theme, and Weinberg's Sinfonietta No. 1. And so thrilled that you're with us today.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's a real pleasure talking to you.
Before we talk about the program, I know our listeners would love to learn more about you. You have conducted orchestras all around the world, and from a very young age, were drawn to music. And I think your first concerto performance with orchestras when you were only 8 years old. And can you talk about what drew you to music and how your journey led you to become a conductor?
Wow, how much time do we have? So it started with, well, I grew up in surrounded by music because both of my parents are professional musicians. My mom's a conducting teacher and a pianist. My dad is a cellist. And actually, people will think it's funny, but being a violinist myself, my favorite instrument has always been the cello. That's probably why I picked up, when I studied in New York City with Pinchas Zuckerman, he made me pick up the viola. And first I didn't understand why, because I couldn't even read the viola clef. And he said, if you want to become a good violinist and musician, you need to play chamber music on the viola. So then I thought, actually, that's great, because that will bring me the closest I possibly will ever be to the cello as a violinist. Because as a violinist, you can't just pick up the cello. That doesn't work. But, with the viola, I was approaching towards my favorite instrument. So to go back to your question, one thing led to the other. Of course, music was always in the house. Then came quite a difficult time, because I grew up in Lithuania, where I was born, in the capital city called Vilnius, where also Jascha Heifetz was born. So I should have really never played the fiddle. Coming from the same city, like maybe the greatest of them all, or one of them for sure. Yes. And so, yeah, my parents decided, Lithuania back then was part of the Soviet Union, and they didn't want their little son, aged 3 years old, to grow up in this terrible regime. So my parents emigrated in 1978 when I was 3 years old to Vienna, and ever since, Vienna has been my home. So now for nearly 47 years. And one thing, as I said, led to another. First, it started with my love I never had a love per se to the violin, but my grandparents, who were non-musicians, came home one day with a little violin, lied to me, pretending that they brought me a cello. So they said, here you have your cello. So I started playing the violin, holding it like a cello, until my daddy, who was playing at the Philharmonic in Lithuania, took me to the rehearsal. And I saw that what I have at home is not a cello.
That's interesting.
And then, of course, at some point it was too late. So I was never given a cello. And I started scratching around or fiddling around on the violin. And then things moved pretty fast. As you mentioned already, with 8 years old, I had my debut. Very, very early, maybe a little bit too early even for my taste. If I look back, if I see these 8-year-old kids, I don't understand how can they do it. It all happens kind of subconsciously. But yeah, and then started the first competitions, etc. And then there was the big competition in Europe that was televised and watched by 40 million people, the Eurovision competition at the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. And at the tender age of 13, I was lucky to win that competition. And then everything started literally overnight. Lauren Mazel was the very first of any conductor who immediately engaged me. That was in 1988. And then followed Bernhard Haitink, and then Riccardo Muti with Vienna Philharmonic, etc., etc. So, and then in the late 90s, I would say, came the more and more it became more and more fashionable for excellent chamber orchestras to book soloists without a conductor. So I had this tour with St. Martin in the Fields, the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, one of the finest chamber orchestras. And I remember standing in the rehearsal just with the Mozart concerto and just waiting for the entry for my entry. And the concertmaster said, Julian, do you want to work with us? Like, share your ideas, because we don't have a conductor, so we can just, if you have anything to say. And I was so amazed because nobody ever in my life had asked me for my opinion, like for my ideas, because naturally the conductor is leading the rehearsal, never the soloist. And so this is how suddenly something made the switch, because I did have a lot of ideas to share. So I started sharing it, not knowing if any of the musicians would agree or react to them. And yeah, that was kind of the start when I felt that there was a response and there was an interest. And then I actually wanted to really start studying conducting, because for me, conducting is something so different than from knowing the stage as with an instrument in your hands. So one thing is to be a violinist, to have, an instrument that you kind of learn to master over the years. But then the same applies for conducting, in my opinion. You really need to learn this craftsmanship, the language, this very, very vast and really gigantic chapter of about 1 million things you have to know before, in my eyes, one is qualified to step in front of these fine musicians of actually any orchestra, and specifically wonderful orchestras like such as Phoenix Symphony is.
That's a really inspiring story. So it sounds like the invitation from leaders at St. Martin in the Fields for you to share your views helped you to realize how much you had to offer. That really helped to begin thinking about things in a different way. It was part of your journey to becoming a conductor.
I'm so grateful to them, because really nobody until that point even, which is normal, because of course you have the conductor, and as a soloist if you have a couple of wishes, of course the conductor always tries to accommodate the soloist, or most of the cases, you want the soloist to feel comfortable, and if the soloist has special wishes, of course one is always open, and it's very important, like especially for me, knowing both sides of the coin. It's when I accompany a soloist, I know how it feels, and I know what I would want from a conductor, so maybe that a little bit helps for me personally. But yeah, the fact is that of course the structure is such that the conductor leads the rehearsals, and the soloist can ask a couple of spots to be played a certain way, but the interpretation of the concerto is definitely led by the conductor.
Really wonderful. Remember, when I was a professional oboist for many years, one of the things I appreciated about conductors on the podium is if they, in a similar way to what you experienced in St. Martin in the Fields, they invited, kind of helped to draw out my best as a musician. And I'm curious, you have conducted so many orchestras around the world. And so what is it like to come and work with an orchestra for the first time and to get to know that group of musicians? Many of our audience members might not realize that it all happens in 1 week, just several rehearsals coming together, and then the concerts are coming. How do you get to know musicians and make music with them so quickly?
It's very, very special, of course, especially if you meet an orchestra you have never worked with. So that is always, it's like meeting a person that you have never met. And so what one tries to do is, it's all about respect, it's about chemistry on the one hand, and that I owe to my dad, who has played all his life last stand of, let's say, the fourth orchestra in Vienna. So not at the Vienna Philharmonic, not at the Vienna Symphony, but there is a very nice also symphonic orchestra that is the fourth orchestra, let's say. As in the ranks, they're sort of the least famous one, although they're they play wonderfully, and they can play really great with when they have wonderful conductors. So what I learned from my dad, yeah, he played over 40 or 45 years in orchestra, last 10 cello. I have learned to respect every single musician, because there is always a story behind everybody. And of course, to even get a place in an orchestra, in any orchestra, you need to be so exceptional and so brilliant. And to win an audition is practically impossible. There are so many things that have to fall into place. So this for me is number one, is the respect in front of every single musician that is on stage. Then comes an expectation of the orchestra, because the most interesting part, and maybe the audience doesn't see that, because the audience comes to the concert, and the concert is for me the dot on the I. I don't know if you have that saying in the States, but
Sure.
you do, yeah. So, but the I itself are the rehearsals. And so in the rehearsals, the whole chemistry and everything is being established. And the most important in a way is, yeah, the orchestra does expect, I think, to a certain extent, the conductor to have a very clear plan and concept of how he today views this very piece. On the other hand, me as the conductor, I want to learn from the orchestra, because the orchestra has been playing together for quite some time. Of course, people come and go, but there is a certain sound, there is a certain tradition, there is a certain way of communication, of making music. And in every country, in every even city, every orchestra is entirely different, has its own language, its own identity. So it's for me to get to know, to inhale this identity of the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra. But everything has to happen very quickly. As you said, we only have a couple of days, so everybody has to be super prepared. So that goes without saying. I need to know the scores inside out. The orchestra musicians are highly professional. They come already totally prepared to the first rehearsal. And so, of course, you start, everybody's professional, and yet it's not enough just for, one professional to meet a professional orchestra. That's not enough. So then you very quickly try to sort of find the balance between what you get from the orchestra, and then what you can offer, what you can suggest, and how quickly you can hopefully convince the orchestra to take you on this journey together. So it's a journey.
Well, we are so excited to have you in Phoenix in just about a month from today. Let's talk a little bit about the program. I mean, this is a really wonderful program. We've got, I mean, the centerpiece of this, perhaps we might say, is Beethoven's Eroica Symphony. But on the first half, we've got a brilliant cellist joining us. Santiago Cañón-Valencia will be playing the Tchaikovsky. Can you talk a little bit about the program, and there are some things that you're particularly excited about as you think about these concerts coming up in November?
Absolutely. When I was programming the repertoire, I was thinking, because on the first glance, you see a variety of composers, and one might ask oneself, but what is the whole, kind of dramaturgical approach to it? Does it have, what does Weinberg have to do with Tchaikovsky and with Beethoven? And basically what struck me and what makes this concert really special for me in terms of repertoire is that these three composers had one very strong thing in common, and that is resilience. And if you think, if we start talking about the first piece on the program, the Weinberg Sinfonietta Now, Weinberg, this is a composer that Polish-born, Jewish Polish-born, lost practically his whole family in the Holocaust. somehow managed to flee to the Soviet Union, but then faced the Stalin repression after World War II. And, with his immense personal loss, with his family perishing in the Holocaust, despite all these tragedies, this Sinfonietta No. 1, which is hardly ever played, is in a way a testament to his survival and his ability to create beauty after enduring unimaginable grief. And the work has so much folk-like melodies that represent his heritage. The energy, it's a very virtuosic piece, but it is based on Jewish themes. I think this overcoming repression to live under in the Soviet Union, Weinberg's music is often, he was very much in the shadow of Shostakovich. And but now I think in the last, let's say 10, 15 years, his music people are realizing more and more what an extraordinary composer he was. And I'm so glad and so happy that the orchestra, the Phoenix Symphony, agreed to perform this piece. I don't know if it has ever been played by the Phoenix Symphony.
I don't think it has, and I will check with those others on our staff about that, but I think that this is the first time, and that is so inspiring, and thinking about all that he went through, and he was still able to create this great art, and for us to now be sharing it with our community. It's really inspiring.
Thank you, Peter. And if we continue on to the Tchaikovsky Rococo variations, first of all, I'm equally excited to have Santiago as our soloist. He is one of the finest cellists of the younger generation that we have today in the world. And I have had the pleasure of playing chamber music with Santiago. So we know each other really well. And I think that is also something that makes a concert maybe in some way even more enjoyable, when the conductor and the soloist know each other, like each other, respect each other. When the chemistry is already there, then it's much easier, because this triangle between conductor, orchestra, and soloist is so essential to the atmosphere on stage, which then transmits to the audience into the hall. And so Santiago is going to play one of the most beloved and one of the most difficult pieces for the cellist, the Rococo variations. Well, that was very much inspired by Mozart's love to by Tchaikovsky's love to Mozart, and of course this admiration for the classical elegance and beauty, while putting emotional depth to this piece. And again, this is a composer who had a lot of resilience, which lies in his homosexuality, that he could never live out in those times, in the 19th century. That was a complete no-go. And his failed marriage and his societal and personal challenges, it really showcases his incredible inner strength and resilience for the legacy that he formed, and he left us with the most glorious music. So I think that again, this resilience also in Tchaikovsky's life definitely plays a role, and that kind of gives this whole program also a context, an overall context.
So that thread that kind of ties everything, brings everything together. And is anything you'd like to share about Beethoven's Eroica?
Of course, the people know all the stories, that it was originally written for Napoleon Bonaparte, and when he crowned himself, then Beethoven got furious because he was very politically aware. And but what people might not know is that Beethoven, he wanted to commit suicide 1 year before he wrote Eroica. And this is when he wrote one of the most touching, incredible letters called the Heiligenstadt Testament. He made a testament to his brothers. And I live a 15 minutes drive. I'm talking to you now from my home in Vienna, which is just 15 minutes in the car from Heiligenstadt. So I'm walking these streets of Beethoven, not daily because I'm traveling a lot, but it's out in the, let's say, in the green part. So a little bit out of town, Heiligenstadt, the area. And Heiligenstadt is surrounded by wineries, and this is where Beethoven had, he had many homes in Vienna, but his most favorite and most frequently visited home was in these outskirts, in these vineyards. And he was turning deaf, and he wrote this Heiligenstadt Testament saying that he doesn't want to live because he is socially incapable. He's suffering from incredible depressions because of that. And he, writes about how they should not fight once that he is going to end his life, that they should share everything equally. And imagine, and this is what makes Beethoven so incredible, throughout his life, in his darkest personal moments, he writes the most triumphant and joyful and beautiful music. Like a paradox, it seems. So he writes this heroic symphony 1 year after he was about to commit suicide, because he cannot stand the fact that he's turning totally deaf. And I think that this, again, overcoming repression. And of course, he broke, and let's say not broke, but he expanded the symphonic form and brought absolutely gigantic dimensions to the form of symphonic writing. So he was maybe the biggest revolutionary in the times of revolution when he was so much against it. But yeah, I mean, the personal and artistic repression and the demonstration how you deal with this, and composing one of the most significant works of classical music history, just face to face in a time when he was seriously thinking to end his life, is something extraordinary. And of course, you have this heartbreaking slow movement, the morning funeral march. But overall, this is, I mean, Eroica, then Beethoven 7 and Beethoven 9. These are his three most triumphant symphonies.
And the incredible strength that he had, and the resilience, as you've talked about, and that all of these artists had, makes for this such a compelling performance, not only what we'll be hearing, but knowing what was behind the music and what these artists went through during their lives that helped enable them to create this. And in a way, despite what they went through, they were able to create this just incredible music.
And I'm so happy to bring these composers to Phoenix, because this is also where I come from, because my roots, I was born in Lithuania, but it was Soviet Union. So I do speak Russian. And let's say before the war, I have so many wonderful and beautiful friends there. And I was lucky to have been working with so many incredible musicians like Rostropovich or Yuri Temirkanov, who was an amazing conductor, just recently sadly passed away, and so many great artists that when I was young, I was learning, and also through my parents who studied both in St. Petersburg at that time called Leningrad, when Mravinsky was, the music director, one of the great conductors. At that time, the Leningrad Philharmonic was really an orchestra of world class, world premiering most of Shostakovich's symphonies, but of course also all Tchaikovsky's work. So it's kind of also where I am coming from my roots, despite the fact that unfortunately now, and I have to say this, it's going back to the same time which somebody like Weinberg or Shostakovich and all these great minds, they lived under such oppression. And unfortunately, the history is repeating itself. So I'm, of course, very sad about that, but I'm happy that still, musically speaking, I feel very strongly about performing these composers, such as Weinberg with my Jewish heritage, like Tchaikovsky with my Russian background, and Beethoven, because 98% of my life I've lived in Vienna, and Beethoven has also lived most of his life in Vienna. And growing up with the Vienna Philharmonic under Carlos Kleiber, even I had the honor to be there for so many concerts of Leonard Bernstein, of Abbado, of Giulini, of so many incredible conductors working on this symphony. So I have so many vivid memories. And yeah, just living in Vienna is still like, maybe, and don't misunderstand me, but we are still like, it feels when you walk the streets of Vienna that you're like 100 years behind. You still have the sounds of the horses, the horse carriages, and you see on the buildings, here is where Franz Schubert lived, here is where Mozart, here is where Haydn, etc., etc. Because all of these composers, they all went through Vienna, because this was where they got paid the most. All the composers, they were commissioned by the, let's say, high society of Vienna, and that was the popular music at the time. And so they were ready to spend big amounts. And because when people ask me, why is it Vienna? Why did all composers, or nearly everybody, at some point, they all came to Vienna? Why Vienna? Why not any other place? And I think that this is one of the answers, that there was such a demand for music and for commissions. And that's why it's so important to commission young, talented composers today as well, to give them the chance. Also for violin makers, cello makers, instrument makers. Yes, I do play. I'm very lucky. I have an instrument, a beautiful Stradivari instrument on loan from a private foundation in Vienna. But I also have instruments from modern makers, because they also deserve to have a voice. And so I think always this collaboration between living composers and artists, conductors or soloists, is so important to inspire each other.
In a way, there's a similarity today where extraordinary music is enabled by visionary community leaders who know that classical music is one of the most important achievements of Western civilization, and want to nurture it, help to promote it, help to continue to advance it. So there's although the world's very different today, that is still very true. And our orchestra is in a community that is really vibrant and dynamic. And I think you're going to find that there's just a remarkable warmth on the stage and in the community when you're here. It's just an amazing place. We're so looking forward to having you here. In addition to the extraordinary program that you've just talked about and that has this deep personal resonance for you, there's also a mystery piece, which I think we want to remain a mystery until November 8th, Friday night, the first night when you're here. But can you say anything any hint about why you chose the mystery piece that will be also playing on that special night?
Because it's just perfectly suits to this theme, resilience, but it has humor and irony and sarcasm. So I think that, and if the people listen to our conversation, they might already have a little vague idea which composer it might be, but we are not going to reveal the mystery piece. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called mystery piece. But it really, I'll be so interested to hear what the public, how they will react. But I think it's a very, very nice addition to the program. And it's just a couple of minutes, but it's really playful, joyful. Yeah, as I said, full of wittiness. And yeah, I'm very curious how the public will perceive and receive it.
If someone's listening to this and they want to find out what it is, all they need to do is to get a ticket to come and hear us at Symphony Hall on Friday, November 8th, Saturday the 9th, or Sunday the 10th of November. I have one last question for you. One of the important things to us is engaging and nurturing the next generation of music lovers. We are going to have people at the concerts when you are conducting who might be hearing a symphony orchestra for the very first time. So do you have any advice for those younger listeners who might be hearing you lead our great orchestra?
I don't have an advice. I just want to tell all of the children, all of the teenagers, the twins, anybody who is ready to just open up and forget that classical music is serious music and oh, that's something for my grandmother or for my parents maybe, because it's the coolest thing in the world and it's the most thrilling and exciting thing. And it's like watching the most incredible suspense thriller or anything that you love. Everybody is more than qualified to go to a concert. You don't need to know anything before. You just need to be ready for adventure and for an incredible time. And I guarantee that they will come back. We just have to bring them there the first time. Once you manage the first time, they'll come back.
We are just thrilled that you will be coming to Phoenix to lead the Phoenix Symphony concerts from November 8th through 10th. What a marvelous program, and it's just a joy to talk with you today. Julian, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter. I can't wait, and I'll see all of you very, very soon. All the very best.